Welcome back to another episode of Decoded. My name is Jesse, and I'm the writer, director, and narrator for the Lost Codex episodes. And guys, I have been wanting to talk about this episode for a while. And the reason I hesitated there on the intro is because I was going to add another part, but I was like, you know what, it's going to spoil part of the podcast. So, not that the title hasn't spoiled. There was a second, I chose not to. This topic we're going to talk about the Warcraft RPG, and my experiences with that, playing the only D&D tabletop campaign that I've ever done. I've only done one, and it was this story you're going to hear, and this is going to actually cover the course of three podcasts, right? That's a lot. Part one is going to be introduction, meeting the characters, and my thought process in creating this campaign. Part two is I'm going to literally just tell the story of the campaign and all the funny moments that happened. And part three, which won't actually happen until next year, sometime in early 2019, I'm going to have Shadow Chorus. For those of you in the Discord, Shadow Chorus has done a lot in modifying and creating his own kind of Warcraft RPG and updating a lot of it since Blizzard hasn't really done anything with their RPG. So I'm going to have Shadow Chorus. He's done so much work. Those of you in the Discord, you'll know he's talked about it. And the amount of effort and work that he's put into it. We're going to have him on part three to talk about sort of what he's created and go from there. I am still a little bit sick, so I apologize for all the coughs. I'm going to lean away from the microphone. There's not a lot of news I want to talk about that's going on this week. I feel that if I talk about the news, there's just going to be a derail on everything, there's a lot of topics on, Heroes of the Storm and store mounts and stuff like that, and the Hive Mind. By the way, we're going to be doing a Hive Mind podcast probably next week. I'm in the process of kind of figuring out who my guests are going to be for that, and we're going to have another Secrets podcast. So get ready for that. Wintervale has started, and there's some new toys, and I believe new models were found. A new Mets and the Reindeer, a new sleigh, stuff like that. And the only other thing I want to talk about before we just dive right into this is the Elixir of Tongues. I've mentioned this on stream before, but the Elixir of Tongues is really, really cool. For those of you who don't know, last week was the Q&A with Blizzard, with Ian and Josh, and they talked a lot about all the problems going on in the community, and I actually think it was a really well done Q&A. I think, for the most part, a couple questions were dodged or deflected, but for the most part, it was good. And one of the problems that happened in 8.1 was the add-on cross roleplay was actually broken. It allowed, and forgive me because I don't know the exact logistics behind it, but allowed you to communicate cross-faction using the communities feature in-game. It allowed role players on the Horde side to talk with the Alliance role players, and lore-wise, there's language barriers, but everyone can speak Common. So Horde and Alliance should be able to talk, but for game purposes, they can't. And so this add-on kind of got a way around it. It actually disabled in PvP. There was a couple of circumstances where it was disabled, so it wouldn't be game breaking. It couldn't be used and abused. It used the communities feature. That's what it used. And it was broken in 8.1. And so one of the questions that Ian answered on the stream, was this intentional? He said, no, it wasn't intentional. There were some security issues that they had to patch up, which ended up breaking this add-on. But in addition to that, they don't actually mind the factions communicating, which kind of took me by surprise. Blizzard's kind of been always silent on this issue. So when he then dropped this next bit that they're implementing, and they implemented by the end of the stream, it's called Elixir of Tongues, which allows you to communicate with the opposite faction in-game for an hour. It doesn't work with emotes, but it basically allows you to talk to the Horde if you're Alliance, and allows the Alliance to talk to the Horde, which is huge. For role players who've been wanting cross-faction communication, and the fact that they didn't just put it in a patch. They just hotfixed it in. I think it was Jeremy Fiesel who tweeted that this potion's actually been in game since vanilla, but it never had a purpose or a use. So it's always just been hidden in the files, which makes sense as to why it could have been hotfixed in. But he made a post saying, you know, you've been here a while. Good to see you finally made it to live, buddy. And that's huge for role players. And when we get back to the roleplay podcasts, it's definitely something I want to talk more on, because the fact that Blizzard just hotfixed it at the end of a stream, that's amazing to me. So for those of you who play on roleplay realms and you want to talk to the opposite faction, Elixir of Tongues, you can get on the Underbelly in Dalaran. And you should go do that. I believe it's on sale for 25 gold or 23 gold, lasts an hour. Fizzy Liver Zapper sells it in the Underbelly. With that said, we are going to dive right into this podcast. As I said, it's going to be a 3-parter series: introduction, the campaign, and then Shadow Course is going to come on for part 3. But let's dive into part 1. So, a couple of years ago, a group of my friends and I were sitting around, and one of them says, like, we're talking about board games and tabletop games, and someone says, like, let's start a D&D group. Let's start one in the Warcraft universe. Now, my ears picked up at Warcraft, but I had zero interest in D&D. This might be heresy. People might get mad at this next part, but I'm not a big fan of board games. Board games that I'm unfamiliar with, and not because I don't know the rules and I'm gonna lose. There's been several times my first time playing a game is I'll pick it up rather easily. I'll still lose, but it's like, okay, easy to understand. But one of the main reasons I don't like board games is because when you open a new board game and you're sitting around with your 5 or 6 friends, you spend an hour and a half reading the instructions and arguing, and then the game doesn't actually end up happening, or the game lasts 20 minutes and it's like 45 minutes of arguing, 10 minutes of gameplay. Never been a big fan of board games that are new to me, which is kind of unfair, because how the hell am I going to get to know board games if I don't play them? But that's just been me. I like watching people play board games. I like seeing the conflicts and friendships almost break and crumble when people argue over gameplay arguments, not rule arguments, but never been my thing. So when they said D&D, I was like, I don't even know what that is. I'm not interested, and I was automatically just zoned out. So they're talking about it, and they're like, Jesse, you gonna join? I'm like, probably not. I'm like, why? This isn't a board game. I said, well, it's a table game. It's the same thing. And they said, no, it's not. Do you even know what D&D is? I said, to be honest, I don't. It was complete ignorance. I knew that there were character sheets involved. I knew there were a lot of numbers involved, rolling, and I knew that there was a lot of time involved. And to be honest, at the time, I had no time. So one of my friends says, well, you play on a roleplay server. I was like, okay, so? Well, that's what it is. It's roleplay. You make a character. Oh. Okay. Do you have is there like an engine? He's like, no, there's no 3D avatar. Well, you can. There's websites out there, but for the most part, you design a character on paper, and then you play that character out. You roleplay that character. Oh. Again, complete ignorance. I had no idea. So I said, okay. All right. I'll try it out. I'll join. So everyone's in. We're all talking about it, and we're all looking at the Warcraft RPG rules. And they're all talking, what race they're going to be. Oh, I want to be a Night Elf. Well, no, I want to be a Tauren. Well, screw you guys. I want to be an Undead. And I made the comment, well, what timeline are we going to be in? If we're going to play in the Warcraft RPG, are we using the RPG as a base, but we can be any timeline? Because there's going to be certain races we have access to and certain races we don't. And then my friend said, well, we got to, I guess, decide who's leading this. And I looked at my 2 friends who were both familiar in D&D and RPG-style games, and I said, looking at them to decide who's going to be, and they look at each other, and then they both look at me. They're like, why don't you be the GM? I was like, why me? I've never played D&D in my life. I'm not going to be the GM, Game Master, Dungeon Master. And they looked at me and they said, yeah, but you know the lore. You know all the lore. We don't. I said, I don't know the gameplay. They said, that doesn't matter. And then one by one, they took a vote, and I was voluntold. And I was a little bit annoyed at first, because I was so excited to make a character. I was so excited just to dive in and create my own personal character. I was gonna have the best backstory. I was gonna have the coolest character out of everyone. And then I'm told that I'm in charge of everything. I didn't know what that meant. And they're just like, you get to create so many more characters. And I thought, all right. So then I said, what is a DM? And they explained to me what I have to do and have to design the story and design the elements and basically the narrator that walks them through. I said, okay, well, what are the main rules that I have to know? And they showed me the character creation process and that I should be involved with that. And I said, can I break any of the game rules? And they said, you can. Don't break it to be malicious or a dick, but this is your game, this is your style. So if you choose to forgo a certain game or a certain rule or a certain element, that's your choice, but don't do it to manipulate the story or whatever. So I thought, all right. So this is my world. This is what I get to do. So they go back to talk about their characters, and I said, and it was really late at this point. We'd already been talking for hours. And I said, guys, don't lock your characters in yet. And they're like, well, why not? And I said, well, I have to decide on a timeline. So I said, if we're going to do this my style, we're going to do this my style. And they said, okay, you let us know what timeline it is. So I went home and I grabbed my book and I started writing in ideas. And I wanted to make this story as canonically possible as possible. I wanted to make this seem like it was a small little side storyline of something that happens in Azeroth, not involving the main characters. So, meaning the characters couldn't just show up and kill Uther, for example. I wanted this to be a situation where it was in an environment that was familiar with them, it was in a time that was familiar with them, with races that were familiar with them, but it was their own story. There's already so many different events and smaller things going on in the lore. I want it to be something like that. So I thought, characters and races have to make sense. So I said, okay, what's my timeline? And right away, I'm going through the WoW expansions. I'm like, Mists of Pandaria would be really cool. New continent, kind of unknown. Ooh, Outland would be really cool. And then I thought, why would I do a WoW expansion? We've already lived through those. We've already experienced those. Most of the people who played in this campaign, all but one, were all active WoW players. One guy wasn't. He had next to no knowledge about World of Warcraft. He knew the Warcraft story because him and I would talk about it. I would show him cinematics, but he didn't know anything about it. The rest of them, they knew. And for those of you, apologies to those listening to the podcast over audio, but for those of you here in stream, two of the players are actually watching right now. Ragrook and Mike, both of whom who are brothers in real life. They were my players, and so I'll get to their characters in a bit. So I decided, okay, what's the timeline? WoW expansion isn't going to work. So I immediately thought, okay, Warcraft 3, that's cool. A lot of big events happen. But Warcraft 3 is all about the heroes. So no matter where they go, they're going to either be involved with Thrall, Arthas, Jaina, Uther. There's going to be a lot of main characters present and up front in their face. I said, okay, let's back it up. Let's go to the Second War. I thought, ooh, big scale battles, huge, kind of like Helm's Deep, Lord of the Rings, big battles on the outside Lordaeron, in the Blasted Lands. I thought, I don't even know how regular combat works. How the hell am I going to do large scale combat? So this isn't going to work. And then I thought, what about in between? What about that really quiet period between the Second War and the Third War, where seemingly nothing happened in lore? I was going to make things happen in lore. I said, okay, all right, here's what we're going to do. And I said the starting setting was going to be Hillsbrad. It's going to be South Shore. So we got together the next day to make characters, and I said, here's the situation. Here's what's going on. I said, in the wake of the Second War, political tensions are high, as the internment camps pop up all across Lordaeron, and the Alliance Kings discuss ways to pay for said camps. It is a political shit show right now. Greymane and Ultrak want nothing to do with this. Dalaran is minding its own business. Lordaeron is saying, we have all these orcs after the Second War. At this point, the Dark Portal has closed. The heroes, the expedition is presumed dead. The Orcish horde is no more. We've got the Blackrocks hiding in Blackrock Mountain, and that's about it. Greymane has actually preemptively started building a wall because he is just huffy and gruffy. He is not the current supportive Uncle Greymane that he is now. He is prime douchebag number 1 back in the day, and Gen has no care in the world for these orcs. He's just put them down. What are we doing keeping them alive? Tensions are rising. With the Dark Portal sealed, the threat of the Horde is mostly dissipated with the exception of one particular clan that is running rampant through Lordaeron. I thought, okay, if I'm gonna have a antagonist in the story, we have to make an antagonist that was actively doing something, whether in the main story or just kind of running around in the background. And so my boy Grommash Hellscream and the War Songs, who were running around Lordaeron at that point, they're still at large. They escaped the Dark Portal and they went north, and at this point they are now north and they are just doing their thing in the wilds of Lordaeron, and people are not cool with that. So I thought, alright, they're going to be the main characters, and I said, okay, there's different lords of different kingdoms, and I thought, what if there's like a little political ring of different lords and influencers from other kingdoms that gathered and meet and were discussing ways, without the influence of kings, to combat the marauding war song. And they devised a plan. And I remember I had like little explanations for these lords. We had an architect from Dalaran who was extremely wealthy and extremely rich and had a lot of political influence. We had I think I actually made the Gilnean Lord Godfrey. We had a member of Taranis' court, a noble from Lordaeron. We had a Strom, what was it? I think it was a Strom warlord. He was connected to the Trollbane family, but wasn't related, and had Strom wealth, so had a big family and massive plot of land, necessarily didn't have any interest in gold. We had a scheming little Alterac crime lord who kind of evaded the punishment that Paranold got, and I had little explanations for all these lords who were kind of scheming and conniving this plot line together. And they discussed, they each said that they were going to put together a contest where they were going to recruit a group of mercenaries, soldiers, pirates, whatever they could, to take down Grom Hellscream and the War Songs, and they thought they could be the ones to do it. So the Eltraki Lord, he was the one who was convinced he could do it. The Stromic Lord wanted to do it himself. The Lords agreed, no, they had to recruit. And so what they did is they pooled their prizes together as one big thing. So the Stromic Lord offered something, and the Gilnean Lord offered something, and the Lord from Quel'thalas offered something. They all each offered something, but they also incentivized with their own rewards and weapons and items as well. And they had to pull their strings to gather these heroes together. So the recruiter for one of these lords puts a call to arms in Hillsbrad. Now you're thinking, Hillsbrad, it must be the Lordaeron Lord. No, this actually wasn't the Lordaeron Lord at all. It was the Quel'thalas Lord. But why didn't the Quel'thalas Lord recruit from Quel'thalas? Well, he wanted to recruit from the mainland. He wanted someone who knew the mainland well enough, but he wanted a wide variety of people. And so why go to Capital City, you know, in the heart, you know, sure there's a lot of trade there. Why not go to go somewhere where the other lord isn't? And so he didn't go anywhere near Gilneas, he went to Hillsbrad. And Hillsbrad, Terran Mill, it was an active trading path between the mountains of Alterac, Strom to the east, Silver Pine. So he strategically chose Hillsbrad because it was a place where people often met. And that is where our story begins, in the inn in Hillsbrad, in South Shore. And so the heroes, what my plan was, they were going to be randomly selected. So they weren't supposed, if they chose to have an existing backstory, if they chose to know each other in their backstory, that was cool. But being grouped together was going to be a complete random event. Meaning they didn't have to know each other. I think only 2 characters ended up knowing each other, and I paired them together on purpose. Everyone else was randomly paired. It was an inn full of mercenaries and soldiers and retired guards, and those selected for this team happened to be the players who were playing this campaign. So, who's the cast? Who are the players? Let's start with Mike. Mike here in chat here. For those of you in the Discord, you'll know Mike as Mikhail the Dwarf. Always posting his selfies. He's a strong, broad-shouldered, bearded lad. And so, as you can expect, he decided to play a dwarf warrior named, wait for it, Mikhail. But not Mikhail as in M-I-K-E-L, Mikhail as in M-C, the word ale, A-L-E. Literally, Mick-Ale. That was his nickname, was Mikhail. Creative, I know. Mike is the perfect incarnation of creativity with names. And I actually sat with each of these players and helped come up with their backstory. I didn't decide for them. They told me what they wanted to play, and they would ask me questions, and I would tell them, here's what you can do, and here's what you can't do, kind of thing. So, Mikhail the Dwarf came all the way from the southern lands of Cosmodan, I guess southern in terms of Hillsbrad. Mikhail was a tradesman, carpenter, and a stoneworker. Couldn't decide on which, so he did both. Wandering merchant and in search of work. During the Second War, he fought against the orcs, not as a soldier, but as a volunteer. As we know, the orcish horde laid siege to Ironforge. And now he's looking to make some quick money. So he sought out the call to arms. Where Mikhail differed from most melee fighters was that he was a dual wielder of shields. He fought with 2 shields. We actually had to come up with a way to deal with this game mechanic wise, because it just wasn't a thing. So he actually had a huge regular shield and then a much smaller shield. I think it had a serrated edge, and it was textured so it was like a giant wide mace that he could just pummel people with, or run in like a full-on battle tank. Literally just had 2 massive shields that he fought with, and that was his character, dual wielder. This was the tank. We met our tank. Now, Matt, Mike's IRL brother, is also a broad-shouldered, bearded lad IRL, and decided to also play a dwarf. And I looked at them, I said, if you guys play brothers in game, I swear to God, you guys are not creative. Matt had no interest in playing a dwarf that was related to his brothers. So this dwarf did not come from Ironforge. This dwarf came from the Wildhammer Highlands, which are now known as the Twilight Highlands. Didn't come from Airy Peak. He came from the northern Wildhammer villages. And his name was Rook Thrunson, and Rook was a Wildhammer barbarian. Unlike Mikhail, Rook was a Second War veteran, a full-on soldier for the Wildhammers, and lost his griffin to the orcs. His griffin died against the orcish horde in the Second War, and Rook was just angry. Rook was just ready to beat up any orcs he could. He actually carried a feather of his lost griffin around with him, wandering mercenary and looking for an excuse to hunt down orcs, and if he got paid for it, cool. So we've got our wandering tradesman, just absolute tank of a dwarf, and now we've got our wearing animal furs and leathers and big huge axe covered in tattoos, feathers in his beard. We got a Wildhammer. We got our 2 dwarves. There are no more dwarves in the group. The next character we got is my friend Peter. Peter decides to play a human tinker. Now, Peter was the one experienced the most with D&D. He was the one who knew how to play Dungeons & Dragons. He was the one who I thought was going to be the actual DM, and he actually didn't. He was the one who really wanted me to do it. So he plays a human tinker from Dalaran named Mordecai. Now, he lived in Dalaran, his parents were magical. He, however, had no magical prowess whatsoever. Went to the Dalaran's magical institution failed horribly, didn't go anywhere in life, and became a tinker, decided to take up the gnomish art of engineering. One of his professors, actually, who knew that he was a failure as a mage, actually helped him, push him in the right direction of being a tinker, and helped him, seek out the proper teachers and the proper, resources to become this tinkering little lad in Dalaran. And he convinces said professor to come with him on a lucrative opportunity, which is where we meet the next character, my friend Cameron. For those of you who listened to the last week's podcast, I played on Paranold for many, many years with my friend Cameron. Cameron, since day one in World of Warcraft, has played a gnome mage named Gizmo. And so, when the time came to make a character in the Warcraft RPG, Cameron, being the creative genius that he is, decides he's going to play Gizmo, who was the instructor for Mordecai, the one who pushed him in the right direction of gnomish engineering. Gizmo is a practiced mage. He's a little bit older. He's about middle age, so he's well along in his mage career, unlike Mordecai. Former instructor, former helper of Mordecai. Mordecai, a little bit of a shit, by the way. Mordecai's definitely a shit disturber. Always scheming, always plotting something. And Gizmo tries to kind of keep him in check. So Gizmo was actually in search of funding for an arcane project and mentioned it to Mordecai, who then said, I have a very lucrative opportunity in Hillsbrad, and convinced him to accompany. Gizmo is not the wandering mercenary type, so it was very much not against his will, but he had a lot of incentive to go without being given a lot of information. So we have our gnome mage, we have our human tinker, we've got our two dwarves. We need some more melee DPS, so we've got my friend Devin, who's also in the Discord. He under the name Skura. He played a human duelist by the name of Mirth. Now Mirth is a former Lordaeron farmer who lost his farm to the orcs in the Second War. Mirth is very much kind of against the man. He's very much like, he hates the political higher-ups. The Lordaeron Guard never did anything for him, whether he was being attacked by gnolls, whether he was being attacked by bandits. The Lordaeron Guard never actually came. Every time they showed up, it was too late. They didn't do anything for him. So when the orcs came, he thought, fuck, I have to abandon my farm. And again, Lordaeron Guard was nowhere in sight. And so when the Lordaeron Guard was doing recruitment, he dodged the draft. He flat out just dodged the draft, said, screw you guys, I'm going off on my own. Very self-serving character. Very, you thought Peter, Mordecai was scheming. Mirth was definitely a scheming character, but he was a bit of a performer. He was basically the rogue, one of the rogues in the group, but he was pretty much the Fury Warrior, fought with two sickles that he took from his farm, and loved he was very athletic, he did a lot of acrobats, and so that actually came into play for his character in terms of he was always trying to improve and impress people. And so he would do like a lot of acrobat rolls during combat, which didn't always play out, but oftentimes they did, and he got some really cool kills. Next we have Jonathan. Jonathan played a human ranger from Strom named Leon. Leon was very much like Rook in that he was a veteran, only he was a Stromic veteran, hates orcs just as much as the Wildhammer, and is actually looking to rid the land of them. So unlike everyone else who's looking for money, Leon was literally there to look for an organized group to hunt down orcs. He had a lot of experience in killing and hunting and tracking orcs, so he thought, if I can have a group kind of behind me, this will go a little bit easier. The money was secondary to him. The priority was killing orcs. So he was a veteran from Strom. And Leon is one of those characters. He actually drops out of the story very early, and his fate was sort of left up in the air. The group's convinced he died, but we'll get to that next podcast. We won't have any spoilers. And the last character is, or the second last character, is probably one of the most diverse characters. Our friend Caitlin played a goblin rogue named Obleen. And I remember that because it was Obleen the Goblin, who's a thief from Booty Bay. This is now post-Second War, so goblins are very much untrusted because many goblins, presumed to be the Steamweedle Cartel, sided with the Orcish Horde and realized their mistake after. So she just got, instantly by having her in the group, their party was automatically distrusted because of her. But she was small and able to keep out of sight, and oftentimes she would try, if they had a caravan or anything, they would hide her just to avoid trouble. And yeah, one of the funny things about her character was her name actually changed fairly early. Completely by accident. They were trying to get into, and this is like the very start of the campaign, and I'm only jumping to this part right now because I'm never going to remember calling her by Obleen. I'm going to always call her by the other name. They were trying to get into Durnhold, and the guards were asking for names, and they got to Mirth, and Mirth can't give his name because he's dodged the draft, so he gives a fake name, and they asked the goblin's name. And I remember Devin saying out loud, "What's your goblin's name again?" And he couldn't remember. So, I was like, no, roll to remember. See if Mirth remembers. So he rolls to remember. Totally didn't roll to remember. And he just pulls out a random name out of his ass. He's just like, Jonks. Her name is Jonks. And for the rest of the campaign, which, by the way, lasts for over 2 years, she was referred to as Jonks. Obleen was lost to the wind. No one ever referred to her as Obleen. Ever again, to the point where the player called her Jonks too. Totally by a misroll because Mirth could not remember her name. And the last character we have is another spellcaster. This was my friend who knew nothing about World of Warcraft. And he wanted to really get into that fantasy element of, the high fantasy that World of Warcraft is. You got your humans, your dwarves, your gnomes, your elves. We had all those characters, but we didn't have an elf. And so he wanted to be an elf, so he played a high elven character. But he didn't want to be a mage, because the mage was taken by Gizmo. So he was looking at the classes, and I was learning a lot too. I didn't know anything about classes. And there's something called a dragon priest. I thought, what the hell's a dragon priest? Elves worshiped the light back then. It was possible, but it wasn't. When you thought of clerics and paladins, you thought mostly of humans. So I was like, okay, let's try. Not that it wasn't possible lore-wise. I thought, let's try a little bit of a creative spin on this. So we found Dragon Priest, and when you picked a Dragon Priest, you actually had to pick which dragon faction. Her name was Obleen Ragnarok. Yeah, definitely. For the first couple sessions, and then people forgot. Even one of the players forgot her name was Obleen. So when you pick a Dragon Priest, you have to pick, and forgive me for anyone who knows the RPG back, front to back if I missay something here, but you have to pick essentially one of the dragonflights to worship. This comes into play when you call upon them for buffs and stuff like that. And so we were looking at it, and right away, he knows nothing about the lore, so he's like, oh man, black dragons are cool, I want to be a black dragon worshiper. And I thought, that's probably not the best idea, considering, Deathwing and all that. So I explained to him why, and he's like, oh, fine. And so I explained to him, high elves, they come from Quel'thalas, very magical base. He goes, well, is there a magical dragon? I said, there is, Malygos, blue dragon. Hasn't been seen for a while, but, Malygos. And he's like, all right, cool. So I'm going to be a high elven priest who owes patronage or shows homage to Malygos and the blue dragons, and carried a little figurine. I think it was a blue dragon head. And at the time, Malygos' insanity wasn't known. So at the time, Malygos was okay. When we get to Wrath of the Lich King, obviously, different story, but the bad dragon was Neltharion. At this time, Malygos was not, or he was insane, but it wasn't public knowledge, or, there wasn't a war going on actively against him. And Altharius' character was, he was once part of a noble high elven family who curated a museum that had ancient goods and ancient artifacts. And I vaguely remember him saying he had to sell it, I think to a distant family member or a rival, to get his family out of debt. His family was killed in the Second War, as everyone else's was in the story. And now he was looking to make enough money back to buy back the museum. And so here he was on the road, a high elf wandering through the lands, human lands, in search of work of some kind. And as a dragon priest, it was funny because people in the group, they heard priest. So this guy was the healer. But the funny part was he didn't have any healing spells for the first 4 levels, and that wasn't his choice. That was the way his class was designed. And so the very first combat they got into, I'll get to that later, but they asked for heals, and he has no way to heal them. And so, of course, they rip into him, laughing at him, mocking him, and he's like, oh, I don't know what I'm doing. You know, he's a buff character. He's a support character. There's not a lot of heals that he can do. So we have our high elven caster character, a sort of mage who uses buffs instead of full-on offensive magic. We have our gnome mage, we have our goblin rogue, we have our human fighter, we have our dwarven tank, we have our other dwarven fighter, a two-handed fighter, and we've got our Stromic ranger, and of course the tinker to blow everything up. Now, I have my book here with that is ancient from when we did the campaign. And the year was, I think it was year 9 or 10, and it was near autumn harvest. Yeah, it was right near the Thanksgiving event. I think it's because we started near Canadian Thanksgiving. And so what happens was opening campaign. They're in the inn, and I'm playing the recruiter, and I randomly select these characters. The only ones who were paired together was Gizmo and Mordecai, because they came from Dalaran together. Mikhail was chosen on his own, Rook was chosen, everyone was chosen on their own independently. And the prizes that were being offered up front, there were more prizes behind the scenes, but this was, by the way, this was a huge party. Now, before I dive into the campaign, I actually missed something. When I came back and I told them we're doing a second war thing, they said, well, what can we be? And I said, you can be humans, high elves, or dwarves, or gnomes. Or goblins. And they said, well, we can't be orcs? I said, no. I said, if you can find a reason I said, okay, here's what I'll allow. I said, if you can find a reason, and I mean a good solid reason, to have some sort of monster race, like a half troll who's been living in the wilds by themselves, or that was really the only one I gave, or even a full troll, forest troll, prisoner character or something. I said, if you can convince me, I will allow it. No one tried, because they were like, no, that's way too much effort. So they were kind of a little bit bummed out when I said that they could not be night elves or Tauren or orcs or Draenei or anything like that. So I decided, I said, I'm going to make some of my own mechanics here. I said, we have a lot of different nations. And this was the day and age where everyone was talking about sub-races. This was World of Warcraft, Warlords of Draenor. People were talking about sub-races, everything. And so I thought, okay, let's make sub-races. So I said, I'm going to make certain stats for Ironforged, Bronzebeard dwarves. I'm going to make certain stats for Wildhammer dwarves. I'm going to have certain bonuses. I said, I will even allow Dark Irons if one of you could come up with a good reason. I gave High Elves didn't need to do anything. Goblins didn't need to do anything. And the Human Kingdoms. I said, when you pick a human, you have to tell me what human kingdom you're from, because I have to. I'm going to give you a bonus. So if you were from Strom, you got a certain bonus. If you're from Gilneas, you got a certain bonus. If you were from Dalaran, you got a certain bonus. All this stuff, I made it so that they had a little bit more creativity. It wasn't just, I'm playing a human. It was, well, where are you from? What is your nationality? Let's give you a little bit of a bonus. And that is why we've got such a diverse cast. Wildhammer, Bronzebeard dwarf. Strom, Dalaran, Lordaeron human. You got a gnome, you got a high elf, and you got a goblin. You've got people from and no one wanted to be from the same area. So the fact the gnome was from Dalaran didn't bother the human who was from Dalaran, because separate races, right? So the prizes, you guys want to hear the prizes? This was This was mostly, think of a very Hunger Games kind of scenario, with the higher-ups being so desperate for this goal to be completed. Instead of entertainment, it was get rid of Hellscream, but also a little bit of a flex fest for them. They got to, I recruited the killer of Hellscream. And for the record, I said this was a canonical campaign. Their goal was to hunt down Hellscream, but there was no intention for them to kill Hellscream, and I'll get to that later. So the rewards were here. Here are the rewards. They're just a couple of the rewards. 10,000 gold pieces pooled together by the 7 different lords. They had a personal ticketed invite to the Gilnean Black Market auction, which was invite only. There was 3 weapon writs of up to or equal value of 1,000 gold pieces for any weapon crafting. Same with armor writs. There was property being sold in Borealis in the Merchants District, and I believe 2 lesser titles of lordship, which includes criminal pardon, negotiable foreign taxes, upper class status. So for those of them who had a criminal history, this was highly ideal. There was a lot more, but it ensnared their attention. So we've got Leon, the Strong Guardian Scout, the Stromic Scout, who was chaotic neutral. We've got Gizmo, the Gnomish Magi, who is neutral good. We've got Mordecai, the Daloranian Tinker, chaotic neutral. Altharius, the Quel'dorite Priest, true neutral. Mikhail, the Ironforged Dwarf Warrior, neutral good. Mirth, the Lordaeron Human Warrior, neutral evil. Rook, Wildhammer Barbarian, chaotic neutral. And Obleen, the Goblin Rogue from the Steamwaddle Cartel, chaotic neutral. Now, they were going over the contract, and it was their first campaign. And this is, I'm not gonna brag, but I'm gonna brag here for a second, because this actually turned into a little bit of a tradition for us. So I looked at them and I said, as the recruiter, here's your contract, go over it, and we're gonna food's on the house for you guys tonight in the inn. And I made it so that when they went to the inn, every time they bought food, I made it so their currency mattered. But I said, food's on the house for you. And it was their first campaign, so of course, first session, so they didn't know how much currency was going to matter. But I said, food's on the house for you guys. And I remember Devin Mirth saying to me, what's on the menu? And I thought, good thing you asked. This is being hosted at my house. We're in my basement. Everyone's sitting on the floor, sitting around a big table. It's a low coffee table. And everyone had drinks already, so I went and grabbed some food, and I come out with this big platter. And on the platter, we had 3 different types of cheeses. We had kielbasa, we had little pepperonis, we had pepperettes, we had strawberries and raspberries. We had sourdough and pumpernickel bread, 2 different types of dips, a hummus. I came up with a massive platter, and they were like, holy shit! It cost me a small fortune. But I brought this out for them, and they dug in. I went full on the food that they were eating in character. I didn't want to make it, here's Doritos and cheesies. I brought them out a full platter of meats, cheeses, bread, olives, fruit, and oh yeah, I went ham. And at the end of the session that night, I said, did you guys enjoy the food? They were like, that was awesome. And I was like, thank you. It cost me a small fortune. I said, you guys want to do this in the future? They're like, yeah, we do. And I said, all right, I love you guys, but not that much. So if I do it in the future, we're splitting the cost. And they all agreed. So what happened was I would plan, okay, guys, Wednesday night, and I would text them Wednesday at noon, and I would say, we're meeting tonight for 7. Are you eating before the campaign? If not, are you eating at the campaign? Yes or no? I need to know. And most of the time they said yes, and the $60, $70 grocery bill was suddenly a hell of a lot more manageable with everyone chipping in. Everyone would pay me the X amount of money, and it would be an absolute feast. And we did that every time, to the point where someone's like, can we have like pizza? And everyone was like, no, we want bread, we want cheese, we want, pizza is bread and cheese, but we want meats and stuff like that. We don't want There's no pizza in Azeroth. Go to Undermine if you want pizza. Spoilers, we didn't go to Undermine. So, we started the campaign, everyone's pigging out, and I thought, we can't have our first campaign without our first battle scene. So, they step outside, they're about to go, they go to bed, and they wake up, and they step outside, and there's a bunch of thugs in South Shore. Some of them are people who weren't picked for this team. Other people are just angry ruffians. And this is where their first battle starts. How many thugs were there? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. So again, campaign with 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, or hang on. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. 8 characters in combat. That was not easy. That was not easy to do. And it was fun, but combat took forever. So usually we would build to combat, or we'd start with combat, but it became a situation where if I wanted to do a big battle scene, I had to make sure we had the whole night. Random encounters weren't exactly random. 8-person party. It was huge. It was actually insane. And so actually what happened was, for the second campaign, first time as DM, massive campaign. Yeah. First time playing the game, too. Let's not forget that. The second session we did, 2 players couldn't make it. The High Elven Priest and the Wildhammer, they couldn't make it. So what I did is I was determined to have it remain, to have a canonical flow to it. So in the middle of the night, one of the things that the elf had to do every morning, this was part of his class, was in order to relearn his spells, he would have to get up and meditate in the morning. So he was the first one up out of all of them, every time. And he's getting up meditating, and the Wildhammer gets up to go have a smoke outside, and there's the elf meditating, and they decide to go off on a little bit of their own little adventure. And while the rest of the group went elsewhere, the rest of the group, I think they left a note. The rest of the group goes to Durnhold. They go, I think they found like a wanted poster for Yetis or something. And so the barbarian and the elf go into the Yeti cave that's just north of South Shore. We all know that Yeti cave. While the rest of the group goes east towards Durnhold. And they're about maybe a couple hours apart because the elf and the dwarf left in the middle of the night. And in the Yeti adventure, they and this was their, I think they fought 3 Yetis. And there's only 2 of them, and none of them was a healer, so it was kind of fun. It was their, they didn't come close to dying, but it was a little bit of a risk there. The group gets to Durnhold, and this is where the name change happens for the goblin. I think it was literally like this halfway through the second session that her name changes. And again, the barbarian and the elf weren't there for that session, so they weren't there for the whole name change, which is why Ragnarok here in chat didn't remember her name being Obline, because he only met her once as Obline and wasn't there for the name change. So at the gates of Durnhold, they get searched and everything, and they get let in, and each of them had different weapons. I think the Tinker had an arm-mounted crossbow. Mirth, the duelist, used 2 sickles. Gizmo had his staff. The ranger had a bow, the goblin had her daggers, and then Mikhail had his 2 shields. So off they go, and they find out that there's a gladiator ring going on. And they want to fight. They want to just go into it. As, most campaigns, you don't want to go the boring route, you want the action. So they dive into the ring, and they were fighting against a mountain lion, a mountain lioness, and then an ogre came out. And so they're in the lower parts of Durnhold, and they're actually walking towards the little ramp that's going to take them into the arena. And they pass some cages, and there's some orcs in some cages. And I remember Mirth looking into one of the cages. He wants to inspect the orcs, and he's looking, and the orcs are all kind of growly and kind of keeping to themselves because they're going through their lethargy. But there's one orc sitting by himself in a cage, sitting in a chair, kind of sitting in the shadows. And Mirth tries to talk to him, and the orc looks up at him, and through the glare of the fire of the torch on the wall, they can see these bright blue eyes staring at them from the darkness. The arena match starts, so he leaves, but Mirth was face to face with Thrall in that cage. Thrall was the one sitting. It was a young Thrall. At this point, it was year 9. Dogfood has gifted 1 tier sub to Ragrook. Well, thank you, Dogfood, and welcome Ragrook. So this was my first little introduction to some lore characters. Thrall at this point was not fully grown. He was still young. He was a child, so he was a little kid. That was it. I was trying to remember. Out of all the cages, the one that he looked in was the one that had an orc child in it, or an older orc. Or an older child, rather. And Mirth wanted to know why there was a child in there, so he said hello, and the orc looked at him, because Thrall could understand Common, and then the arena match began. And I remember someone saying, "Can we fight the kid? Are we able to fight the kid?" I was like, "No, you can't fight the kid." And they didn't know it was Thrall. I was putting little hints down. I didn't say this was Thrall. I was like, "Oh yeah, orc with blue eyes sitting in..." They didn't know who it was, and they figured out it was Thrall later on. But that was my thing, is I would remember dropping little hints and stuff like that, and seeing if they would pick up, and they eventually did, but they didn't for here. But someone wanted to beat up Thrall. I think it was Mike. I think Mike's like, "Can we fight the kid? Does that count?" Because everyone was placing bets on who would win, and so Mike wanted the best chances of winning, so the dwarf wanted to beat up the orc child. So they go out into the arena, and they fight 2 mountain lions. And the mountain lions aren't even dead when Blackmore is a little angry, because this group's doing well. These mountain lions, the thugs they fought had barely any health. I think on here they had like 3 health max, while the mountain lions started off with 17 and 24 health. So it was a big difference in fighting, but there was a lot more of them, because the thugs they fought in South Shore, they just shreked. They just absolutely just destroyed. So I was like, okay, I need to up the combat here. So Mountain Lion had 17. Mountain Lioness, Big Mama Lion, she was bigger. She had 24 health. The Mountain Lions weren't even dead before Blackmore was like, bring in the next challenge, and an ogre comes running in with 39 HP. And I remember Mirth was the one who got the killing blow on the ogre. He decides to crawl up the back of the ogre for an acrobatic flip, and he executes the ogre, and his kill attack he did really well on, but his acrobatic performance roll off the ogre was bad, very bad, and the ogre almost landed on him. I think it did land on him. He was hurt at that point, and so they leave from Durnhold. I think they left a little bit richer. You know, not crazy, but, you know, enough to the point where they made some money. And on the road back, they come across the Wildhammer and the Elf, who had gone back to South Shore, collected their reward, and so the Elf and the Wildhammer made their money, and the group in the Durnhold Arena made their money. And the whole point, every time they stopped somewhere, they wanted to talk about, they were asking, have you heard about, you know, orcs? Do you know anything about Grom Hellscream? And little hints were being dropped. So, you know, they were talking about the western and eastern forests of Lordaeron being heavily dense, you know, what's now known as the Plaguelands, or former Plaguelands. And so they were like, all right, well, we gotta head north. So they start heading up north from Durnhold, past Terran Mill. And they're passing Dalaran at this point. And I think we had a session where they go into Dalaran. Peter wanted to restock on some of his trinkets, and What I learned quickly, and Peter, if you're watching, I'm calling you out. What I learned quickly was just as much as Mordecai was a schemer in character, Peter was also a schemer in real life. Peter was always trying to find the biggest and most explosive weapon he could find. Things that he shouldn't have been able to make at his level. He was always... I had to use Devin, who was the warrior, the duelist, Mirth, to sort of keep Peter in check. So I wouldn't know if Peter was trying to take advantage of the situation, and the amount of times Peter almost blew up the party, but it was fun because it always left... Everyone had their role, and Peter didn't really have a role except to cause chaos. There was some punishments that I laid down. So they're heading up, and in the middle of the night, they get attacked by some forest trolls. Forest trolls who are a little bit bold in their attacks. They've now come down from Airy Peak. From Airy Peak, and the Eastern Plaguelands has the trolls up in the north there. This is a distant traveling group of forest trolls, and they attack the group in the middle of the night. And we've got Troll 1, Troll 2, Troll 3, Troll 4. Oh yeah, 7 trolls. If I made it 3 trolls, it would have been 8 people on 3 trolls, and it would have been over too fast. And this was actually to the point where this is where they actually took a lot of damage, because the trolls attacked them in the middle of the night. So the trolls actually got some... that was the word. They got a bonus attack because they ambushed them. And towards the end of the fight, it was right around... I sort of kept a track on the time and how things were going, and it was right around sunrise that the trolls attacked. And some guards were actually patrolling nearby. And the guards came in and actually saved the day, because this was a 2-parter session, and it was kind of difficult to play other characters, so South Shore guards came in with their high-powered rifles and destroyed the trolls and saved the group, and the group mostly had it under control. So the group keeps going, and they go up, taking the river, the river path up between Alterac and Dalaran, and they come up near the river, and they actually end up in Anderhall. And Anderhall... Oh god, Anderhall, this poor Anderhall at this point in the lore, because this group terrorized Anderhall to no end. Several times. So they show up in Anderhall, and in Anderhall, they're... outside Anderhall, there's a bunch of guards. So let me explain who this lord they're working for. The lord they're working for is a lord from Quel'thalas, and he's a character that I made prior to the Warcraft RPG. And his name is Lord Landon Tysamir. And Lord Landon Tysamir, the backstory I have for Lord Tysamir is he is a very old family of Quel'thalas, whose ancestors come from 2 sort of early groups. The earliest settlers who landed on Quel'thalas, there was and this was before Quel'thalas lore came out. There was the big brutish fighter ones, the more Gilnean of the groups, the big rough and tough clan, human clan, and the seafaring, more magical clan. I used early arcane magic as my justification, but since Quel'thalas, I've changed it to sort of similar to Tide Sage magic. And we had, so I developed Lord Landon Tysamir, older lord, had multiple children, and his role as a lord is he was an ambassador to Quel'thalas. And what he would do is, although he was primarily focused on strengthening the power of Quel'thalas and opening up trade, in order to do that, he realized that he needed to reach out to other kingdoms. And so while ambassadors did that, as part of their job, that was the focus of House Tysamir. Is when he had his kids, he would send his kids to different kingdoms and work up the influence. So his oldest son was sent as a as a what's the word? Page, sort of a squire character to Stormwind early on. He sent a character to Dalaran. He sent a character to a child to Strom. Very concerned about the political well-being of his house and of his kingdom, and sort of didn't use his children in a bad sense, but very much used his political influence in that sense. Very powerful. And so at Durnhold, when they were interviewing this group and asking their questions, they asked Mordecai what his name was. And Peter, being a shit, said, "Yeah, I'm Mordecai Tysamir. I'm related to the Tysamirs," and that's why they got let into Durnhold. Was because and I made him roll a bluff check, and it passed convincingly. And so the House of Tysamir and their group come into Durnhold, show up Blackmoor's arena, take their winnings, and leave. So word travels fast. So waiting for them at Anderhall, and the Tysamirs knew they were going to Anderhall because when they left Durnhold, they said, "We're going to Anderhall next. That's going to be our next big checkpoint." And the Tysamir guard was waiting at Anderhall for them. Not a lot of them, but a couple of them. And so we have a character here called Lieutenant Galen Chamsbury, who was a patrol lieutenant of Landon Tysamir. And he had heard of the group's activities. He had saw them bloodied up from the troll attack, had heard that they had successfully, beat up the thugs in South Shore, put down this crime gang, hunted some Yetis, proven themselves in the arena. They stopped in Dalaran, had a positive encounter in Dalaran, and so far hadn't been too destructive. So the Lord Tysamir sent some incentives to stay on track and to behave. So they had some prizes here, but there was also a fine of 20 gold to Mordecai for lying flat out. So, and right away, this group wanted to fight everything. So they were like, we're gonna fight this. And I remember one of the players saying, like, "Are we really gonna fight the guards of the guy who's paying us 10,000 gold? Are we really gonna do that outside Anderhall?" And I said, "You guys make the choice." They didn't. They chose not to. And so some of the rewards that I had, he was so mad that I took 20 gold from him. I said, because he was the one who still wanted to fight. He wasn't giving up his 20 gold. And I said, "Buddy, here's the prizes they got, by the way. Each of them got a special thing. The goblin got a mithril steel serrated knife with a ballistic piercing end, so the pommel was actually a ballistic weapon. True silver arcane shard, which was actually an offhand weapon for the mage. We had black steel bow caps with that were serrated bow caps and 15 explosive arrows for the ranger. Studded gauntlets with slated folded arm guards for, I believe it was for the duelist. We had another magical offhand for the priest. We had a leather doublet with absorption plate. I believe that went to Mordecai. Disarming hook, which I think went to Rook, and then a slingshot. No, disarming hook went to... I don't know who the disarming hook went to. Attached to the main shield. Yes, that went to Mikhail, because he was able to attach to his shield, and then a slingshot with a flashbang went to the Wildhammer. But, as a process, they took 20 gold from Mordecai. And he was pissed, and I said, "Dude, it's 20 gold." But thing is, Mordecai actively spent his gold to upgrade his pieces. So he did not want to part with it, but they all looked at him and said, "You chose to lie at Durnhold. You chose to say you were related to Lord Tysamir." And I made sure they knew that Lord Tysamir was sort of well known. It's like saying you're related to, you're Godric Gryffindor's great grandson, or not on that level, but a well-known name, right? Or in Game of Thrones, "Oh yeah, I'm related to the Starks." It's like, oh, that's not something you want to drop everywhere, depending where you are, right? So, hello, Jeff. So this group arrives in Anderhall, and they, at this point in time, I think this is when they steal the horses. No, this is when they... What do they do here? It's been a while. It's been like 2.5 years since this campaign ended. No, it's been 3 years since the campaign ended. I can't remember what they did, but they started a fire somewhere. I think they set the barn on fire and then left. They bailed. Why? I don't know. There was a reason, I think. So they leave, and now they're traveling through... Yeah, well, okay, this was the barn that caught fire. Because they go to Enderhall like 3 times, and every time they cause chaos. So they're passing through, they're going east through Enderhall, through the Plague Lands that aren't Plague Lands yet. Oh, yes. The goblin actually flashed everyone to distract them, and they set the barn on fire. And it was a pretty good distraction. The goblin, lifting up her shirt, yelling fire, fire, and the Enderhall people were very interested in why A, there was a goblin, B, running around with her tits out, C, oh my god, that barn's on fire. And it was like the big barn too. It was where a lot of the activity in Enderhall happened. I can't remember why they burned it down though. They did something that they needed to get out fast. So first strike against Enderhall. They leave, they go east through the eastern forest, through the western forests. They cross the river. And they get to a part where at some point in time, I think it might have been to get the horses. At some point in time, they come across this troll artifact. And this troll artifact was actually they had a horse called Everyday Fluffy. That was the name they decided to give him, was Everyday Fluffy. They come across this artifact, and they meet this troll. And right away they want to attack the troll. But the troll, and again, this is back in Warlords days, right? And thinking back on this, there's a really great comparison or parallel with this troll character, who they refer to as Troll Bro from here on out. They never remembered his name. They only called him Troll Bro. Troll Bro and Bwansamdi actually have a very similar sort of personality, as the second they meet this character, Mike's saying it now, the second that he wants to make a deal with them, he wants to make a bargain. And they were very untrusting, but he was he first appears in a tree. He's like dangling down from a tree, and he drops down, and he's covered in these runic tattoos and these great big flowing robes, and he swoops in next to the I think it was the duelist, and he puts his arm around the duelist, and he's all up in his face, and they're talking to like an 8-foot tall troll. So right away, Rook the Wildhammer, who hates trolls, is just ready to fucking go. The High Elf, who also hates trolls, is like, this isn't cool. The Tinker has his bombs out just because everyone else is nervous, so he's like, well, let's make this a more nerve-wracking situation. Mirth, ironically, Mirth, who was the most illiterate and unintelligent character, was actually the one who talked the most. And so Troll Bro he wanted them to do something for him. And he was exiled from a nearby temple and needed them to go in and get something for him. So he convinces them to go into the troll ruins in directions are hard. We're in Eastern Plaguelands. So you know the troll ruins in Northeastern Plaguelands? There. So they go to those troll ruins, and they sneak in. This group doesn't sneak. They fight their way in. And I have a puzzle here, and I'm trying to... I loved puzzles. So when I created... Oh yeah, Mirth, according to the stats, couldn't read, by the way. Devin's character couldn't actually read. So I loved poems, and I loved puzzles. And I'm trying to figure this out here. It's kind of all over the place in my notes here. So the first poem I have is, in order to get into this temple, it's 4 idols here, first riddles clue, match their make to elements true. And I had 4 statues. I had a golden statue, and the statue was depicted of a troll standing upside down on one hand, so he was kind of doing a handstand. A blackened wood statue, so a wooden statue that was burnt, and the troll was holding a torch and a weapon. A cold, glassy statue, so sort of like a glassy material. Troll holding a knife and a severed head, and then a featherstone statue, so a troll with wispy hair and a staff. And in order to escape this room that they got locked in, it was to escape this tomb, insert the keys, make one mistake, your fate be seized. To start you true, on clues done first, move statue 1, don't quench your thirst. Statue puzzle. Troll statue depicted as the champion of Shadra, the spider Loa. It appears to be a regular statue. In the palm of its hand is a button. Stone timers on the wall count down. I wish I had my notes on this. I had a whole separate piece of paper on this one puzzle. That's a shame. I thought I had the notes here. This troll dungeon, this was their first mega dungeon, and there was another voodoo door puzzle that they basically had to know the name of the Loa, which was funny enough, the only character who would have known that would have been the elf character, and he doesn't know Warcraft lore. So this took a little bit of a time, and it kind of made me realize as DM I can't make it a lore-based. I can't have a lore trivia as a certain to be the answer to certain puzzles. And where I'm gonna end here was the Troll Coliseum. And they enter this Coliseum, and it's this massive in here, there was these like really, really narrow stone bridges that basically the stone bridges would go across, and then there was a very steep ramp going down, and then another narrow stone bridge going like less than a person wide, and then another steep ramp, and they could fall, but it was the doorway they needed to get to. There was a longer pit further down. And Mirth actually almost fell to his death here. He slipped because he decided to do a flip because he was an acrobat character, and the dumbass fell. And I believe it was the Wildhammer and the elf who saved him. And they get to this arena, and there's just this massive arena of trolls that are about to conduct a ritual, and in walk this group of intruders, and there's Rook had rope, conveniently the one character, and the funny part is everyone got to describe their inventory the very first campaign, and Rook had a sleeping roll and rope, and everyone asked, why do you have rope and a sleeping roll? And he's like, because I'm not going to sleep on the ground, I'm going to sleep in a sleeping roll. And of course, every time they camped outside and it came to settling up beds, Rook would go out of his way to say, and I put down my comfortable sleeping roll. Quickly, people started buying sleeping rolls because they all got jealous. The fucking bedrolls. Matt made a point of reminding everyone that he had a fucking bedroll because everyone else was uncomfortable. But the other thing was, well, why does he have rope? And then finally, when Devin's about to fall to his death, he's like, I have rope, and everyone's like, oh my god, you do have rope, why? Ended up saving Devin. They walk into this arena, and in the arena, literally just hundreds of trolls. And you can imagine the trolls' shock when in walk this group of intruders. And they're all staring, and a lot of them are undead trolls. There's a lot of necromancy going on. And this was a really big fight. The trolls had very low health, but high attack speed. And so it was a swarm. The trolls just started jumping into the arena, and it became just a free-for-all. It was actually a really fun combat fight because they were able to kill a single troll and maybe 1 to 2 hits. But every time a troll went down, there was at least, like, 2 more trolls that showed up. And I think Gizmo, the gnome mage, actually got the biggest kill here. He used one of his giant AoE spells, and I think he got like 14 trolls in a single hit. And he rolled high numbers too. I think he hit them. The trolls had, I want to say, a maximum of, they had 10 attack and 10 HP. And he hit for like 15. But it was an AoE spell, so it was just bam. And I think he knocked, and it was an area of effect. That was it. Hands of Flame. And he just set a whole, like, army of trolls that were running towards him and the others. Everyone else had their backs to them, and he just set them all on fire. The ranger had his explosive arrows, so was firing them into the audience to stop trolls from joining the fight. Rook, Rook had this really strong ability to. Oh, it was deceptively powerful, but it was a one-time use. And the words are hard here. The ranger was firing into the crowd. The Wildhammer Barbarian had an ability, depending on how well he hit, he was able to swing a second time. So it was kind of like a double swing, so like a swing once and follow-up swing. And so he was able to, it was his cleave ability, so he was able to hit a spell and then he could cleave on the second swing. And so he would hit, I think it might be your iPad. He would hit a troll, absolutely decimate the troll. Rook would hit like a monster. I remember Rook, if Rook got his once a day, the Wildhammer could pop Enrage or Barbarian, Barbarian ability, and basically just clear house. And so he does that here. He pops Enrage, and his first like 4 turns, he took out just a huge number of trolls. Just one swing, hits the troll for like 20 damage. The troll's got 10 health. And then on his cleave, hits for another like 13 damage and hits up to 3 targets. So there's 2 more trolls that he just takes out. It was just like a really cool, low HP, massive mob that all came swarming in. And I think at the end, oh my god. So towards the end of the fight, a dire troll comes running in. A big, huge, galloping dire troll with 2 undead bears at his side. And as Mike said in the chat here earlier, Gizmo, the gnome mage, quickly lost his spells. For those of you who don't know, spellcasters can only use a certain amount of characters, a certain amount of spells per day, and then they have to regenerate those spells. They have to meditate. They have to go out of their way. You can't just say, okay, I regenerate, now I have my spells. You have to actually spend X amount of hours, not hours gameplay, but when you do a time skip, okay, I spend the next 5 hours meditating, and I gain X amount of spells back. So Gizmo, because he chose to go for a massive AoE spell, he was done after that. He had very little. He buffed a few people, and that was it. So he had his little staff, and so he was hitting his staff for like 4 damage. So he would like take out a troll at the kneecap, the troll would fall down, and then he would just beat that troll's head in. And he ended up getting here. He ended up getting 14 in the first blast, and then he was able to take out another 4 just by beating their kneecaps in and then crushing their skulls. They're undead trolls, so it was easy. If for some reason he decided to kill an undead gecko nearby, there was an undead gecko, and he just beat it. And so I have here in the kill order, dire troll abomination, undead amoni bear, and undead lizard. Not befriended. Gizmo killed it, just flat out. I think it's because it attacked him too. It was like it wasn't just wandering by, it jumped on him, so he just beat it to death. And this fight was supposed to be very like Lord of the Rings style with Gimli and Legolas just surrounded by orcs, and as Mike said earlier, still only counts as one. They were kind of circling each other and fighting. Mirth is running around, spinning with his scythes and jumping over and rolling acrobats. And the kill count here that I have is Gizmo wins with 19 trolls killed. The Ranger actually only got 2 kills. Mordecai, who had at this point, I think he had he uses his bomb, so Mordecai gets 6 kills. Mirth got 10 kills. Rook got really close to 10 kills. So Altharius is the high elf. He had actually used most of his spells before the arena, so he only had his sword. So he only got 2 kills. The Ranger ended up getting 11 kills. And Jonks got 13 kills. I don't know how she got 13 kills on something. And then she got another 3 kills. And then the dwarf, Mikhail, with his 2 shields, ended up getting 7 kills. And yeah, that was actually it. When Gizmo got his 14 kills, it was kind of like we had to roll to see how many trolls he got. And so he did it, he did everything. 14, and everyone was like, oh my god. And then Mike from the other side of the room was like, it still only counts as 1. And everyone lost it. And so they got their treasure. And in this next room, they found an Amani war maul, leather lynx cap, so like a lynx skull with like a cowl, an ancient Arathorian sword, which was supposed to have a second side plot line, but the Strom player ends up bailing soon after this scene. A coil link mail chest, so it was literally a chainmail vest made of troll coins. Enchanted glowing troll branch. It's a shrunken lynx skull on a stick. Golden troll sacrificial blade. Massive Norlac bear shield made of solid stone. At this point, the dual-wield dwarf, dual-wielding shield dwarf ended up getting rid of one of his shields that picks up a massive shield made of stone, which actually increased his weight a lot, so he had to adjust some equipment around. And a cloth sashed, bloodstained with troll runes of power. And I tried to make it so that every reward had some sort of use by at least 2 players. Certain ones, like the shields, I couldn't because Mike was the only one to use a shield, but I wanted it to have players could fight or debate or, roll the dice, like literally in character, roll to gamble for certain rewards. I didn't want to have set rewards for everyone. And they found a hell of a lot of troll coins, which actually turned out to be fake later on. They thought they were rich. They weren't. We're gonna stop the campaign here, guys. We're gonna have actually some visuals for the next episode, and hope maybe actually when this for episode 2, so you guys can see what the characters look like. And there's a special surprise at the end of the campaign. The players who are watching, listening, don't ruin the surprise. But there's something I'm gonna show you guys later on that was made years ago. But for part 2, I'm basically gonna just continue where we are. They actually have a boss room right after this where they speak to a Loa speaker. They don't speak to the Loa speaker, I'm sorry. They fight the Loa speaker. And yeah, there's a lot of stuff. There is a massive adventure coming up that involves a trial, involves setting an orphanage on fire, involves a pirate ship battle, involves stealing more horses, involves going to Quel'thalas, Murlocs who are terrifyingly strong, the Scarlet Monastery, Stratholme, terrorizing Andorhal again. There's a lot. There's a lot coming up. Blowing up an inn. There's a lot coming up in the campaign. This is just, again, this campaign lasted 2 years, guys. 2 years! And the players, my friends in real life, they always tell me, continue the campaign. And I would love to. Honestly, the story ends. It ends at the active end 1. Oh yeah, 2.5 years in, and there's no conclusion. There's no conclusion. And it just sort of dissipated because it was so hard to organize. And I have had Devin and Peter and Matt and Mike, they all tell me, A, I should continue the campaign, but B, I should do one on stream. I should do a campaign involving the Lost Codex, involving sort of like a much lesser and less fun or less engaging Critical Role. And I've thought about it, and I want to. And I'd have to look at the logistics and having like guest players and stuff like that. That would be super fun. This was, considering it was something that I had no interest in doing. They said, Jesse, we're doing D&D. I was like, nope, I'm out. But it's Warcraft. Don't care, I'm out. I had an absolute blast, and I would spend hours just designing fights and designing puzzles. There's one puzzle coming up, and I want to create a visual. It was a board with pieces. They go to Skolomance. They go to the House of Barov, which at this point in lore, Lord Barov would have not quite been a necromancer yet, but it still would have been a little bit of a weird place. And they break into Skolomance, and there's a puzzle room that my players spent 5 hours figuring out. Sprawled it out in my basement. Pretty sure Mike passed out. They were figuring this out, and it was, I'll get to that next week. It was fun. And I tried to accommodate characters who couldn't make it. So certain characters, they couldn't show up one day. So for example, here's a fun example. I think it was this next room. Yeah, this next room, Mike couldn't make it. Ragnarok, it's where one player almost died because of one spell. It was the puzzle scene. Where one single character gets... I'm trying not to give anyone hints. Where Curtis's character got launched across the room. Sorry to anyone who jumped because of that clap. The fucking room just... No, that was in... that was in Skolo. So in this, what happens next, to kind of build some anticipation for next week, or next time, because I'm probably doing the Secrets Hive Mind podcast next week, or maybe we could do two podcasts. Mike couldn't make it for this next big boss fight. And so, in the room where they found the treasure, the reason they're in this temple is they're trying to get an artifact that's in the next room, but it's guarded by something. And they have to figure out a puzzle to open the door, so they figure, we're going to sleep here, and that's where we ended the session for that night. The next morning, they figure out the puzzle really easy, and they break in, not realizing it's a boss room. They walk in, and then the doors close, right? And the music starts playing, and like, oh my god, it's a boss room. But Mike wasn't there. Mike couldn't make it. And so story-wise, they opened the door, they woke up, ate breakfast, opened the door, and went through, and they forgot to wake up Mikhail. And so Mikhail was just on the other side of the door, sleeping, and he wakes up to hear them yelling, hear them screaming because they're fighting. And I remember asking Mike, I saw Mike after this fight, and they actually didn't get through this whole fight in one night, because this was a very short night. And I said, well, Mike, what do you want to do? Like, what do you want to do on the other side? I said, you're gonna come back for the next session, and they're already in the middle of the boss fight, so what's gonna happen? He goes, well, the door's kind of closed already. So they end up, spoilers, they end up killing or defeating the boss, and just as they defeat the boss, the doorway that had been locked, Mike had been chipping away at it with his shield, just going ham on it, and finally the doorway just crumbles, and this dwarf comes rolling in through the rubble, stands up ready to fight, and everything's done. And they forgot Mike wasn't even there. I didn't point out that Mike was sleeping, and they knew Mike wasn't there, but they just assumed that he wasn't part of the fight. And so, story-wise, when Mike was sitting there, I said, no, you guys left him in the other room sleeping last night. And then at the end of the fight, the door just crumbles and Mikhail comes just rolling down like 6 hours late. And everything's gone. And that was Mike's catchphrase. Was one thing that I tried to do is I tried to get everyone to engage in a little bit of role play. Some players wouldn't, some players would. No one went full in character, except maybe Devin. Most of them didn't want to have, it's an acting thing, right? People, you get stage fright. I'm the same way. So, even when you're sitting in a group of friends, you didn't really want to put on a voice or anything. And so Mike, who didn't really talk much as a character, the only thing he would say was, aye. So no matter what it was like, Mikhail, like, are you good to go? Awkward pause. Aye. And then, or they're about to fight someone. Like, are we really doing this? Are we really going to fight this big boss? And then in the background, aye. It was just the one thing he always said. But we'll continue this next time. And there's a hell of a lot more to come. There is so much to come. I can't wait for you guys to hear the rest of this. There are so many funny moments. I just want to keep going, but I'm already at this point at the hour and a half mark, so we're gonna stop here. I want to organize some of my puzzles, so I actually have some puzzles to tell you guys about for next time. So thank you guys for listening to episode 32 of Decoded, Warcraft RPG Part 1. Meeting the characters. You guys are going to see the characters next time, and learn about some of the secondary side characters that I'm going to introduce to you. Some characters that I put a lot of time in. And we'll go from there. So thank you guys very much for listening to episode 32 of Decoded. Next week, I'm going to try and have someone from the Secrets Discord and a co-host to talk about the whole new hive mind secret and everything going along with that. Both the process of hunting it down and actually just the logistics of these secrets that are in game. I don't actually want to say that it's locked in, but I'm trying to make it happen. And then, of course, part 2 for this RPG will either be in the same week, or because I really want to talk about it. I have this new desire to talk about the story and to maybe make continue the campaign or something. So we'll see what happens. Thank you guys for listening to episode 32, and we'll see you guys next week for episode 33. Until then, just have a good week. Happy holidays. Christmas time. Oh my god. Next week's Christmas. I'll definitely have another podcast up before Christmas. I'll make it happen. I'm not gonna say Merry Christmas right now, because we'll make sure we have the next one out before then. Thank you guys for watching, and we'll see you guys next time.